SLT Mobitel Home Broadband සමගින් non-stop ගමනකට data බෝවන්. SLT Mobitel Home Broadband සමගින් non-stop ගමනකට data බෝවන්.
දසන කාන්ති චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයුෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වළකයි.
Tonight, mishandled? Investigation to be launched into identifying mishandling on part of wildlife authorities leading to death of a leopard trapped in a snare atop a tree. Extraordinary. Indian oil company Sri Lanka subsidiary in extraordinary profits amidst Sri Lanka's economic crisis. 50 new LIOC filling sheds to come up island-wide. Slashed. Litrogas Lanka Limited makes due on promise of reducing gas prices from tonight. 12.5 kilogram cylinder reduced by 246. Please heard. Energy Minister Kanchana Wijesekara says new fuel quotas for three-wheelers and buses from next week. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9. This Monday, the 8th of August 2022.
වින්දියර මිලිලීටර් 100 ස්මාර්ට් පැක් එක රුපියල් 85ට දැන් වෙළඳ පොලේ.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. I'm Andrew Bernard. New top stories for tonight. The Indian oil company will expand its operations in Sri Lanka by opening 50 vehicle refueling stations amidst the worst economic as well as fuel crisis that is faced with the island nation. Lanka Indian Oil Company Managing Director Manoj Gupta said today that they received permission to open 50 new sheds for which applications for investment will be invited soon. The announcement came with the Indian Oil Company Sri Lanka's subsidiary reporting a large profit for the quarter ending 30th June this year amid economic challenges in the country. The company said its revenue increased by 196% year-on-year to 49.93 billion rupees. Meanwhile, Energy Minister Kanchana Wijesekara announced today that the allocated weekly fuel quota for private buses and three-wheeler drivers will be increased from next week following discussions with three-wheeler operators and private bus drivers. As the fresh week began, the quota of fuel given to the general public was renewed today. The Ministry of Power and Energy stated that the quota would remain unchanged from last week. According to data from the Energy Ministry, over 3.8 million vehicles were refueled with over 23 million litres of petrol and 457,96 vehicles were dispensed with fuel with 13 million litres of diesel during the week from August 1st to the 7th. Among a majority of vehicles are 2.5 million motorbikes. Three-wheeler drivers have meanwhile continued to voice their dissatisfaction over the quantity of fuel allocated for the three-wheelers. Three-wheelers are allocated with 5 litres of guaranteed fuel quota per week under the Fuel Pass QR system. Subject Minister Kanchana Wijesekara said discussions were held this morning at the Ministry of Transport to identify the requirements of the Ceylon Transport Board, private buses and taxis. During the meeting with drivers of three-wheelers, it was decided that measures would be taken to identify those who earn a living from operating three-wheelers.
අපි සතියකට ওই පහ අරගෙන ජීවත් වෙන්නේ කොහොමද කියන එක මහ විශාල ගැටලුවක්. අපි සාමාන්‍ය විදිහට ගත්තොත් එන්නේ ලීටර් 6ක විතර ප්‍රමාණයක් අපිට දෛනිකව අවශ්‍ය වෙනවා.
දැනට අපිට තියෙන තොරතුරු අනුව ලක්ෂ 11ක් තමයි ත්‍රිරෝද රථ සංඛ්‍යාවක් ලියාපදිංචි වෙලා තියෙනවා කියලා තියෙන්නේ නැහැ. මෝටර රථ වාහන දෙපාර්තමේන්තුවේ ලක්ෂ 11යි. QR එකේ ලියාපදිංචි වෙලා තියෙනවා 9,47,000ක් ඊයේ වෙනකොට. එතකොට මේ 9,47,000න් පළවෙනි පියවර තමයි අඳුන ගැනීම වෘත්තිමය වශයෙන් පූර්ණ කාලීන. කවුද කරන්නේ? ඔබතුමන්ලගේ පැත්තෙන් දුන්නේ මීටර එක තියෙන ඒ નિયમિત ගාස්තුව අය කරන සහ ඒ වැඩේ කරන. ඉතින් ඒක අඳුනා ගැනීම කළ යුතුයි. අපිට ලැබෙන හුඟක් පැමිණිලිවල පින්තූරවල තියෙනවා ත්‍රිරෝද රථ තමයි 90ක් තියෙන්නේ පොලිමේ ඉඳගෙනම තෙල් ඉවත් කරන ඒවා. ඒ වගේ ඒවා මාසෙකට අපි අයින් කරනවා QR කෝඩ් එකකින් කිසි කොහෙන්වත් ගන්න බැරි වෙන්න. තෙල්. ඒකට ඔබතුමන්ලා සහාය දෙන්න.
Later, the minister stated that during the meeting it was decided that the Transport Commission would identify requirements of each category and recommend fuel requirements to the Ministry of Energy. Once the recommendation on requirements are received, the ministry will allocate additional quotas on a separate QR code by next week. Until such time, The 107 Ceylon Transport Board depots will continue to fulfill fuel requirements for private buses and three-wheelers as per the approved quota. In the meantime, the Information Communication Technology Agency announced that vehicle owners can once again sign up for the National Fuel Pass system starting today. On Friday, the ICTA stated that the platform would be unavailable for new registrations due to a planned maintenance carried out by the Department of Motor Traffic. In other developments, the ministry also granted permission for the Lanka Indian Oil Company to open more fuel stations in Sri Lanka. Managing Director of LIOC Manoj Gupta said that they were given permission to open 50 new fuel stations. He further said that the new Lanka IOC fuel stations will be opened island-wide. Meanwhile, despite the operational challenges stemming from a forex crisis in Sri Lanka, inflation and higher global oil prices, Lanka Indian Oil Company reported extraordinary profits for the quarter ending June 30, 2022. The company said its revenue increased by 196% year-on-year to 49.93 billion rupees, while the sales volume of the company also increased to 139,762 metric tons from 135,354 metric tons on a year-on-year basis. Now, the United Nations Population Fund has launched an appeal for $10.7 million to deliver life-saving healthcare to over 2 million women and girls in Sri Lanka in the next 6 months. The agency's response is part of the Humanitarian Needs and Priorities Plan launched by the UN Sri Lanka, which calls for $47 million to support 1 million people between June and September this year. The UN Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency, the United Nations Population Fund, has launched an appeal for $10.7 million to deliver life-saving healthcare to more than 2 million women and girls in Sri Lanka in the next 6 months. Issuing a statement, UNFPA says a survey conducted in the UN in May this year indicated that women and girls' vulnerability to violence is increasing, at the same time as including services such as health, police, shelter and hotlines are declining due to a lack of financial resources. UNFPA's Executive Director Dr. Natalie Kanem commented that the current economic crisis in Sri Lanka has far-reaching consequences for women and girls' health, rights and dignity, adding that the UNFPA's priority right now is to respond to their unique needs and safeguard their access to life-saving healthcare and protection services. The statement said UNFPA is providing cash and volunteer assistance to pregnant women to support access to health facilities and continues to build the capacity and skills of the extensive midwifery force across the country. But with infrastructure and transportation challenges, childbirth could be a life-threatening, if not fatal, experience for pregnant women unable to access skilled care. As part of its appeal, UNFPA plans to distribute life-saving medicines, equipment and supplies, including for emergency and obstetric care and the clinical management of rape and domestic violence, to meet the priority reproductive health needs of 1.2 million people. It also plans to supply 10,000 delivery, maternity and dignity kits to women and girls in need, including persons living with disabilities. Providing over 37,000 women with cash and voucher assistance to access reproductive health and protection services is also another planned measure of the UNFPA, while planning to ensure 500,000 women receive information on warning signs during pregnancy. They also plan to strengthening the capacity of 1,250 midwives to support deliveries in primary healthcare settings and for the clinical management of rape. It also plans to support 10 shelters to expand services for survivors of gender-based violence and to provide 286,000 women and girls with information on gender-based violence prevention and available services and support. Supporting 12,500 women with livelihood programming to reduce the risks of gender-based violence, providing 4,000 adolescent girls with menstrual hygiene supplies, and leading and coordinating activities to strengthen prevention, protection, and referral systems for survivors of gender-based violence are also some of the UNFPA's planned measures. UNFPA's response is part of a humanitarian needs and priorities plan launched by the UN in Sri Lanka, which calls for $47 million to support 1.7 million people between June and September 2022. And we'll be back with more news. Stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. Now, the JVP-led Jatika Janabalawegaya will be meeting President Ranil Wickremesinghe tomorrow for talks on the all-party government, although they remain firm on their stance of not being part of the all-party government. However, most political parties represented in Parliament view that an all-party government is essential to build international confidence that Sri Lanka is stable. Last week, President Ranil Wickremesinghe held discussions with most political parties represented in Parliament to discuss the formation of an all-party government. Most of the political parties, including the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and Samagi Janabalawegaya, said discussions with the President were successful. JVP-led Jatika Janabalawegaya said that they will not support an all-party government of President Ranil Wickremesinghe. It is, however, reported that the JVP accepted an invitation by the President for talks. They are expected to meet the President tomorrow.
President has also invited us to discussions tomorrow. We will participate in talks. The government has been formed. President's call for an all-party government after forming a government is pointless. His talks for interim rules are over now. An all-party government that is planning to go for an election within a short period of time will not be formed. We see that a new government to be formed will confirm the power of Ranil Wickremesinghe and show the international community that there is stability in order to obtain loans. This is not a temporary government that sets the path for a public mandate. We have clearly stated our stance of not joining an all-party government. We can go before the President and tell him that we will not be a part.
In the meantime, the main opposition party, the Samagi Janabalawegaya, announced some of the proposals they had put forward to the President during their meeting.
Firstly, the state of emergency should be lifted and country should be under common law. Second was to stop hunting those who went into protest. We will also request to include the basic features of the 19th Amendment while implementing the 22nd Amendment. We requested the chairmanship of COPE and COPA.
In the meantime, parliamentarians expressed their views today on an all-party government.
We are against the move of approaching the IMF. However, the government is working with them. They are planning to allow fuel distribution to foreign companies. We had stated our objection to this earlier too. We want to know whether this has been stopped. They also say that state institutions needs to be privatized. We are against it. It is pointless talking about an all-party government when there are differences. Our 10 parties collectively announced our stance on joining an all-party government. We have presented our proposals. If that is accepted, we will consider. We met him. When he was the Prime Minister, I presented some proposals and voted for him since he agreed to fulfill them. Our proposals include the release of our prisoners. There will be solutions only if all parties in Parliament unite together for an all-party governance. International confidence will not build otherwise.
Now, the price of literal domestic LP gas cylinders has been reduced with effect from midnight today. Accordingly, the price of a 12.5 kilogram cylinder has been reduced by 246 rupees and the price of a 5 kilogram cylinder has been reduced by 99 rupees.
State gas supplier Litrogas Lanka Limited announced a slash in prices today. Accordingly, the price of a 12.5 kilogram cylinder has been reduced by 246 rupees. With that, the new price of the 12.5 kilogram cylinder is 4,664 rupees. The price of a 5 kilogram cylinder has been reduced by 99 rupees and with that, its new price came down to 1,872 rupees. The price of 2.3 kilogram gas cylinder meanwhile has been slashed by 45 rupees to 869 rupees. According to Litro, these prices will come into effect from midnight today.
The reduction is due to decrease in global LPG prices. Price reduction today is based on the newly introduced price formula. Based on that only, we have reduced this price by 246 rupees. First week of every month, we are using the index called Saudi Aramco Index. So according to that pricing, the pricing formula will come to effect every month. By 5th of every month, we are supposed to announce the new pricing. So the trend is, it's a downstream trend right now. Pricing is well according to the well gas pricing.
Chairman of Litro further said Sri Lanka will have sufficient LP gas stocks in the future without shortage.
We have already received about 12 plus shipments to Kerala PTA. By the end of this week, by Friday, the company will complete issuing 3 million plus cylinders, domestic cylinders to the market. So we already have confirmed product till end of October. and also from November 2022 to November 2023, the 1-year tender delivered product from November already been floated, and we are confident that we can finalize is to purchase product from November 2. We will have enough of LPG as a country up to end of October, and from there, from November to 2023 November.
Now, in the wake of Sri Lanka's request to defer the planned docking of a high-tech Chinese research vessel at the strategic Hambantota port, China today took a dig at India, saying it was senseless to pressure Colombo by citing issue of security concerns. Earlier, the Sri Lanka Foreign Ministry in a note asked Beijing to defer the arrival of the Chinese space and satellite tracking research vessel Yuan Wang 5, which was scheduled to dock at the Hambantota port from the 11th to the 17th due to security concerns expressed by India. Responding to reports, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson told media that China had taken note of the reports and assessed that cooperation between China and Sri Lanka is independently chosen by the two countries and meets common interests. It does not target any third party. It is senseless to pressure Sri Lanka by citing the issue of security concerns, he said, in reference to the reports that Sri Lanka's move was attributed to concerns expressed by India. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson went on to say that Sri Lanka is a sovereign state and it can develop relations with other countries in light of its own development interests. Wang said China urges relevant parties to see China's scientific explorations in a reasonable and sensible way and stop disturbing the normal exchange between China and Sri Lanka. According to media reports, India informed Sri Lanka that the docking of the high-tech Chinese research vessel could pose a threat to its national security. Sri Lanka received strong messages of protest from India as the ship was said to have the ability to track satellites and intercontinental ballistic missiles. A leopard who had been strapped on a tree after being caught in the wires of a snare had died after the wildlife authorities had managed to free the animal after chopping down the tree. With this being the case, Minister of Wildlife and Forest Resources Conservation Mahinda Amaraveera said today that an investigation will be launched into identifying whether the leopard's death had been caused due to the mishandling of the situation by wildlife authorities. On the 9th of the 6th of August, a leopard trapped in a snare climbed atop a tree in the Vanaraja estate in Hatton. However, the leopard was stuck on the tree as it was tangled in wires of the snare. The following day, residents in the area of Hatton informed wildlife authorities in Nalatanya area of the incident. Authorities had then taken measures to chop down the tree while the leopard was still trapped atop the tree. Although the tree had fallen onto the leopard after it was chopped down, the leopard was still alive. Unfortunately, after being freed from the wires of the snare, the leopard had died. Wildlife authorities of Nalatanya said the animal succumbed to the wounds inflicted by the snare. The corpse was handed over to the Randanigala Veterinary Hospital for a post-mortem. However, Minister of Wildlife and Forest Resources Conservation Mahinda Amaraveera said that an investigation will be carried out on whether wildlife authorities had mishandled the situation inadvertently, causing the death of the leopard. In this backdrop, environmentalist attorney at law Jagat Gunawardena, commenting on the matter, said that measures must be taken to protect leopards before their population diminish beyond a recoverable point.
The leopard population in the mountain region is facing a lot of difficulties due to loss of habitats and the degradation of habitat, and also by the fragmentation of the habitat. Most of the population is concentrated into small patches of habitats, and because they don't have enough space in the natural habitats or semi-natural habitats, they most often venture into estates and the surrounding areas of farmland, and that's how they always get into the snares and sometimes end up being dead. So this is a recurrent problem in the mountain zoo. And what we have been witnessing for the past so many years is that the population is getting isolated into fragmented small populations, cut off from each other, and also the population is diminishing due to the periodic deaths every year. This is a very bad trend, and it will lead to the extinction of the population of the leopards in the mountain region, especially in the district of Nuwara where most of the incidents are being reported. We have seen that the natural forest cover that is remaining in the Nuwara district is very low, and that is the crux of the problem. And we have to take some mitigative action very quickly if we do not want the population to go beyond a certain threshold limit, which may mean that the population will not be able to recover even if we try to restore their habitat.
Now in your business news, commencing the week, the main all-share price index continued to settle firmly in green while recording a modest turnover as it marks the longest gaining streak since early January. But bond markets were frozen with a few maturities being offered at higher yields, but no firm bids after President Ranil Wickremesinghe's comments on a possible domestic debt restructure. Reversing the continuous buying interest visible on the secondary market during the past few weeks, selling pressure was seen during today's session. Analysts say the reaction stems from concerns raised by investors over the president's statements, which includes a possibility of local debt included in the restructuring talks. Meanwhile, the main index of the Colombo Stock Exchange ended up 1.1% at 8,422.97, marking an 11-week high. This is the 8th straight session of gains, the longest gaining streak since January. Turnover was around 3.3 billion rupees as investor confidence rose amid news of progress towards political stability. Turnover was mainly led by LIOC in the energy sector, accounting for a contribution of 46% in the market turnover. However, foreign investors remained net sellers for the 5th straight day amidst low participation, offloading 155.5 million rupees worth of shares, while domestic investors were net buyers, purchasing 3.24 billion rupees worth of shares. And that's all we have for you this evening. Join us again tomorrow at the same time. Good night.